Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Think Business. Look forward to talking to CEO Jay Haynes. Jay, it's great to see you. You are the CEO of Thrive, and it's great to have you on the show. And I'm looking forward to talking about how you guys help product teams grow product roadmaps. To me, I think it is so critical. I love talking about roadmaps because I think this is really, really important. I don't think enough companies really think about how they're building the roadmap, how they're thinking about their vision, and then reverse engineering all of the things that need to be done to make it happen. So as a business coach who works with successful people to get them unstuck, I love talking to guests on the show who create things that get people unstuck and moving in a direction of growth. So welcome to the show, Jay. My first question to you is, define a roadmap.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks for having me, John. It's great to be here. Love the show.
Oh, thanks so much.
A roadmap is really interesting. It's basically the set of features that you're going to build for your product or even offerings within a service that are going to help your customers. And companies either succeed or fail through their product roadmaps. Examples throughout history are really demonstrative. So BlackBerry, for example, had a roadmap they thought was going to lead to continued success, and they actually had a market cap that was 4 times bigger than Apple's when they launched.
Yeah.
And yet clearly another company called Apple came up with a new product roadmap that was entirely different for the whole idea of what a phone was. And that led directly to Apple's success and to BlackBerry's failure. And that's true whether you look at like Kodak and its history or Encyclopedia Britannica, once big brands all had the wrong roadmap. In other words, I love the word roadmap because they were literally start going in the wrong direction and yet they didn't know it.
Well, everybody's one good decision to success and one bad decision away from complete failure. When it comes to when I think of roadmaps, I think of storytelling as well, because I had a BlackBerry. I was a diehard BlackBerry person. I loved my BlackBerry. I never thought I would have an Apple iPhone ever, and now I have a MacBook Pro that I'm working on, my iPad behind me, my other Mac behind me, my iPhone, all iPhone. And so what are some of the early warning signs? I'm going to be 49 this year, but when I was 23, I started an internet company with my brother and a buddy. And we ultimately sold that company 2 years later to a company called US Web, which you may be familiar with. But I remember going to Borders bookstore in Ann Arbor, Walden Books, and we would be begging them and telling them the internet, you got to get on the internet. And they would tell us passing fad, Amazon isn't going to last. I'm paraphrasing their words, but that's pretty much, what they said. And maybe we weren't good, influencers, or maybe they just made a bad decision, but talk about one bad decision bringing down an entire company that had such a lead.
Yeah, and that's such a great example of where companies are focused on their product. And that seems to make sense because if you're selling books, your goal is to sell more books, and everybody buys books. They bought books for centuries, since the invention of the printing press. And yet it's true in every single market that the products will change. But what doesn't change is the underlying job a customer is trying to get done. And that's really the difference in our product road mapping software is it puts the customer's job front and center. So in that case, it's a great example. How would you analyze the threat of something like Amazon? Well, you can look throughout history, and the reason people switch products, the reason you switch from a BlackBerry to an iPhone, or we switched from, CDs to iPods and then eventually to streaming services, is because a new product or service comes along that gets the job done faster and more accurately.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to spend time with a product, even, book shopping. No one wants to spend time walking around a store, browsing books. Maybe that's an enjoyable activity, but for most part, people want to get the job done as fast and accurately as possible.
Yeah.
And that's where having a roadmap, understanding where what your product does today is slow and inaccurate. Those are the biggest risks to companies. And then understanding where there are opportunities in the market, because a whole set of customers says getting this job done is really slow and inaccurate. In other words, it's a struggle. So they would readily accept a new solution like Amazon.
Well, I think pre-COVID studies were showing that by the year 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist don't exist today. I think COVID accelerated that. And so when you're talking about a roadmap of what needs to be done today, because I want to dive into this, when you're creating a roadmap, you're creating it based on technology that isn't many times even invented yet, but that will accelerate your growth at some point. And so talk about a roadmap today, because I think with COVID, sometimes people have a hard time looking at a 10-year roadmap. I think companies I'm finding are comfortable with a 3-year roadmap. They can have a little bit more control and read the tea leaves a little bit more. So we think right now. 2-year, 1 year, like what's the shelf life of a roadmap today, and how far out should you go? Can you go? And where are the moving parts of the living roadmap?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's the beauty of having the customer's job be your focus of your road mapping,
Yeah,
because we know the job's never going to change. So, for example, if you were trying to beat Apple and Google Maps, we know the underlying job is to get to a destination on time. And,
yeah,
Professor Theodore Levitt from Harvard Business School, said this in the 1960s. He said customers don't want a quarter-inch drill; they want a quarter-inch hole. So, if you looked at getting to a destination on time, you said Apple and Google Maps are just dominant in that market. Well, if you were building a roadmap to beat them, you'd want to understand everything in that job. And there's generally, 15, 16 steps and about 100 different customer needs in every job.
right.
Even getting to a destination on time has 106 needs, which is pretty impressive. So
Wow.
the way to build a roadmap is to say, okay, what can we do today with existing technology that is low risk? So our roadmap for the next quarter would be based on that known technology with very little risk.
Yeah,
Our roadmap that goes out till 2022 and then 2025 might take advantage of emerging technologies like machine learning or AI or VR.
right.
There's blockchain even. There's technologies. And then the beauty for product teams of using jobs to be done road mapping is you can now connect the opportunities for those technologies directly to what need it's going to satisfy for the customer. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, how we always talk about it in terms of short, medium, and long-term road mapping.
Yeah,
And you want to do the things in the short term that are very straightforward and low risk, and you can get into the market as quickly as possible, and yet still create customer value because they're helping the customer get the job done faster and more accurately.
yeah.
So it's a way to do short, medium, and long-term road mapping.
So talk about being specific and measurable in your road mapping. I mean, how you not only on how you are specific and how you're measurable, but the roles, responsibility, who does what. I mean, to me, those are elements of road mapping that are really, really important.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so one of the things about Jobs to be done is, as you said, you can break everything from the customer's perspective down to measurable and actionable customer needs.
Yeah,
And the way that we structure them, we generally think of them, a customer need is having an action and a variable. So, for example, if you're trying to get to a destination on time, you need to plan your stops. If you got a busy day and you got to be to multiple locations, and one of the needs there is to determine the optimal sequence of stops. So in that case, that's a powerful customer need because it's got an action verb, determine. It's got a variable, the optimal sequence of stops. And
yeah,
just like the job, that thing's never going to change over time. No matter what solution emerges or what product emerges to satisfy that need. 100 years ago, people needed to determine the optimal sequence of stops. 100 years from now, it's going to be the same thing. So if you're trying to product roadmap against that, if you're a product manager, you need to say, okay, well, let's analyze the competitors' solutions. And then if you're on a product design team, you need to figure out, okay, what's the best interface for that? How are we going to do it faster and more accurately? And then if you're a marketing team, you need to message to that need as well. And if you're a sales team, more likely at a B2B market, you'll need to sell to that too. So
yeah.
one of the things about Jobs to be done is it really helps coordinate product, marketing, and sales team on the customer.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's rewind for a minute. Let's rewind. I love talking to CEOs. I think we're going to see more entrepreneurial endeavors over this next decade as people have gotten in alignment post COVID, through COVID, into their personal values. They're starting side businesses, quarter business, 25% of their time businesses. Um, And so, some people are leaving their careers, starting something fresh. It's in alignment with their soul. And so, as a CEO, just rewind for me, because it's never a straight line, right? Like being an entrepreneur is never, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then boom. So, give us kind of the 2-minute Reader's Digest version of how you got to today.
Yeah, that's great. And I was at a point where I was stuck. So I love what you do, because I literally had to
Thanks.
become unstuck.
Yeah.
And so I'm 53. So, the first 10 years of my career, I was in the private equity industry buying companies, and you could create value through debt and equity and cutting costs. But
Yeah.
I was always interested in, like, what are we doing for customers? What's the innovation process? And then I, worked as a product manager at Microsoft for a little bit when I was in business school. And Microsoft is a dominant company, but there wasn't a scientific method. And then I ran a couple startups, like you, with some Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road investors.
Yeah.
And even there, I got stuck. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, it can't be all about Jay's big ideas. A lot of entrepreneurs like to think they're the next Steve Jobs, right? And I
Right.
got kind of sick of my own ideas. I was like, there has to be a better approach to this. And that's when, so I was around 40 years old, and I was thinking, okay, what's the next decade look like? And I got unstuck through Clay Christensen, who I studied with at business school, and he'd been focused on disruption then. But then he really went on from disruption to talk about jobs theory and jobs done thinking. And it just immediately resonated with me
Mhm.
was, oh, every company wants to be customer focused, of course. But also, if you're working at a company, it also helps think about your customers and their lives. What are
Yeah.
your customers trying to do in their lives? How can you make their lives more meaningful and better? And what's fascinating is you don't want to build a product that your customers spend more time using. You actually want to build a product that helps get their job done so they can get back to their lives doing interesting
Yeah.
things, that are interesting in their professional and personal lives. And
Yeah.
actually what I think you see now in COVID is that the pandemic made people realize they can get jobs done with Zoom and, web conferencing and video conferencing apps that they used to hire an airline to do, where they had to get on an airline and fly somewhere to get the job done. They now can do it on Zoom. And that's a great example of where the job's the same, but the technologies and products are wildly different.
Yeah.
Zoom and an airline are obviously different platforms.
That's great. I know Clay Christensen, you're talking about as one of your mentors. Did he pass away?
Yeah, last year, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
at the
So
high.
he was relatively young. I mean, he's known for. I just want to just give a little bit of tribute to him. How Will You Measure Your Life? Right, is one of his
Amazing
books.
book.
And so, what are some of the lessons that he taught you? Because he was all about ideas to change the world and, things of that nature. He was a Harvard Business School professor. So what were some of the things that he left with you on how you're measuring your life differently today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about it a lot. I just reread, maybe I was inspired by COVID, but I reread How Will You Measure Your Life recently. And it
Uh-huh.
really is a truly amazing book. Highly recommend it. And what it made me think about is what are we going to do as a company to help other companies, ultimately to help people? Because every
Hmm.
customer is a real human. It's a real
Yeah.
person with real anxieties, real struggles, real pressures. And we live in this hyper competitive world. And so we've actually started building out a database of jobs in consumer and business and medical markets. And the way
Yeah.
we like to think about it is we're helping our companies and these product teams really empathize with the struggles that their customers are going through. And there's a lot of struggle in the world today. People have stressful, anxious ridden
Yeah.
lives, personally and professionally. And so that's made us really think through the jobs that we're focused on. And I think that's really important. And Clay, was such a pioneer in this type of thinking. And, we try and honor him all the time because he, passed away last year at way too young of an age.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really been meaningful for me personally because I enjoy this work. I enjoy thinking that at the end of the day, we think like you, John. We actually think of ourselves as kind of teachers and
Yeah.
therapists.
Yeah. Well, you have to be. I mean, it's like, I think you remind, as I'm listening to you and I understand your product, and I'm the same way. It's like you're a teacher and a student, sometimes all within a minute, right? You're learning and then you're teaching, and then you're learning something new and say, oh, what? I didn't realize that my product could actually do a sliver of that, right? And so it's like, just kind of talk about that, how you become more intimate when you are a teacher and a student. You become, you actually learn more about your own product.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that was in your book, if I remember correctly, wasn't that? There was a part of
Did
your
you
book.
read
Yeah,
it, my book?
yeah. It was part of
Oh,
your book. It
yeah,
was great.
yeah.
I
Thanks.
recommend your book. It's great.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, and
I appreciate you. I appreciate you reading it. I'll give myself a shameless plug right now. You can
yeah,
download
there
my
it
book
is.
at johnwaskin.com. I give my books away for free. My ebook, but my book too. I give it all away for free. So,
Yeah,
but I appreciate you taking time to read it.
yeah, they're really great.
Thanks.
But yeah, I think that's so true, and that's one of the things we really enjoy is working with companies where we're a teacher, but we're learning from them all the time too.
Yeah.
Like to be in the mode where you're constantly thinking through problems together and coming up with new solutions. It's really a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And that's what's great. We're not pontificating saying, "Hey, do it our way. Here's the only way
Right.
innovate." We're trying to be a teacher and a student at the same time, and I think
Yeah.
those are really the best moments when the best
Yeah.
insights come.
In that, talk about the kind of the undercurrent and the through line of, your legacy. I mean, I'm a big believer. It's not like, you don't work your whole life to leave a legacy. You leave a legacy daily, and in what you do, how you move. At least that's how I look at it, and kind of hold my own moral compass. But how do you kind of build your legacy on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think that's great. And if I could choose one word, it would be empathy.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah.
That's what I think is interesting, because also, especially, we live out in California, and so we work with a lot of companies that have a lot of technology, and so everybody likes to think about tech and they like to think about their product. But
Yeah.
really, if you put on that empathy mindset, you can find things daily to empathize in what people are going through, because
Yeah.
everybody has a struggle, whatever it is. And you've written about I love your bio too.
Thanks.
And everybody has a story like that. And whether it's, whether you're targeting consumers who
Yeah.
are, whether they're parents or, retirees or travelers or whoever, or if you're targeting people at businesses, you can empathize with their struggles in the business community as well. And certainly
Yeah.
in medical examples, in medical markets, it's just, and COVID just makes that
Absolutely
overwhelmingly obvious. Yeah.
I'm reading Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Light, right now, which I highly recommend. I listened to the Rich Roll interview with him. I don't know if you ever listened to Rich Roll's podcast. He's unbelievable. And this was like
he's
a 2 hour.
The swimmer and the triathlete.
He's the ultra runner.
Yeah, ultra runner.
Yeah. His podcast is incredible. Anyway, he interviewed Matthew McConaughey. I love his podcast, but he interviewed Matthew McConaughey, but and his book is amazing. But one of the things he talks about is when he was raised, if they didn't have any shoes, his mom would say, I'm paraphrasing, his mom would say, okay, well, stop complaining. I'll show you somebody who doesn't have any feet. Like, right. So, don't keep on going. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit more about your business, your ideal client, right? Who are the companies that are, stuck? They don't have the direction that they need. They don't know why. Like, who's your ideal client?
Yeah, that's great. And it's usually a product team that's struggling. So they've had some success and they can't create a second successful product, which is very, very common, because companies have one big success and they can't create a second one. Or they have some competitor that's entered the market. Your example of Borders and Amazon is a great one.
Yeah.
And they can't understand, why is that competitor winning? Like, what are they doing that we don't have?
Yeah.
And a lot of time, that's why I kind of mentioned we're teachers plus therapists, is in these high stretch situations, there can be a lot of product team disagreement. Is John's idea better than Jay's idea? And we often, this has been referred to as the hippo phenomenon. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's the highest paid person's opinion phenomenon, where the person who makes the decision is the highest paid person, because if your name is Jeff Bezos, you're going to tell your team what to do, and
right.
do it, right? And And so those situations that are difficult, new competitors, if you've projected, 15% growth and you hit 8, or you projected 25% growth and you hit 4, whatever, you're missing your numbers,
Yeah.
you're struggling. Those are situations where we can be really helpful, because there's usually some reason. It usually is that you're a competitor or something's happening in the market,
Yeah.
that something's getting the job done better for customers,
Right.
and figuring out what that is important.
And it's interesting because you're talking about companies that I think are a little bit behind real time. I mean, to me, the way I've always looked at business, and I'm going to be 49 this year, is I'm not changing what I'm doing, but I'm always raising the level of consciousness, and I'm always reinventing the way I do it, moving more towards simplification. Or I'll do a podcast, and then I'll kind of put some bells and whistles in it as people start to kind of hop on the podcast, right? But I'm always reinventing myself. So I never care if people copy, because I'm always seeing, where can I go and take this next? And so the companies you're talking about are kind of stuck in this one hit, one product wonder. And they're by the time they call you, they're probably 6 to 18 months behind, while the other companies are being innovative. So I just am trying to kind of light a fire under people, because I don't usually like to talk about pricing, because if somebody listens to this in 2 years, then it kind of sticks you. But as of March 16th, 2021, and your prices could change any day, it doesn't make sense not to do a trial, $29 per month per user. You can quantitatively look at the return on investment for everything that you're doing. And so how do you encourage companies to kind of jump in and dive into the investment and start working with you?
That's great. I mean, the first thing is, our course is currently free. So we want people to learn, and back to thinking of ourselves as teachers. And your podcast is an example of that too, which is great.
Correct.
So just learn, and that's the first step. And then really, you can do jobs to be done work at almost any budget range. If you just have a little bit of budget, and for example, you're a small startup, you can start doing some of this work. If you've got an initiative where, and we work with some larger companies where they have to grow by $1 billion to make a difference. So that takes more work, and there's obviously, you can allocate more budgets. But I think your point about ROI is a really great one. The biggest risk for companies is they're investing a ton of money in building, marketing, and selling their roadmaps, an enormous amount of money. And how much risk is in that roadmap? Because we always like to say, your roadmap is what generates your revenue. It's the difference. It's not your sales team that generates revenue. It's your roadmap, because your product should, if a really great product, should sell itself.
Yeah.
And so if you understand the risk in your roadmap, meaning how much value is it going to deliver to your customers before you invest your company's capital in that roadmap, that's just a very highly risky game. And so one way to think about jobs to be done and our tool is, it's a risk mitigation system. It's basically a way to say, hey, should we invest in features X, Y, and Z versus features A, B, and C?
Yeah.
And you at least want to have some risk assessment before you make that decision. It's not based on an opinion, but based on what your customers are struggling with.
Yeah. No, I love what you're talking about. Tell people how they can connect with you.
Yeah, great. Our site, thrv.com, is the easiest way. You can contact us directly through there. Also, you can sign up for our free course in Jobs to be Done directly through the site.
All right. Quick speed round. You ready?
Yep.
Favorite book and why?
The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins.
Nice. All right. All right. Best piece of
and why? Actually, if you want to understand economics, I think it's really valuable to understand evolution.
Yeah. And what's the name of the book?
The Selfish Gene.
The Selfish Gene. All right. And who wrote it?
Richard Dawkins.
All right, Richard. All right. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Work smart, not hard.
That's good. That's good. Define yourself in one word.
Empathetic.
Hopefully
empathetic.
Finish the sentence. One thing everybody needs to do in 2021 to have a more productive year is?
Think about your customer's job.
Yeah. That's really well said. And that's so important. I think one of the things what you're talking about right now, everything that you're talking about is so important. And I just want to give a couple final thoughts. The risk that you put into a roadmap, that you then the detail that you put into a roadmap. Every company needs a roadmap. Every company needs that blueprint so they can reverse engineer all the nitty gritty that they need to do. I'm a big fan as a business coach talking about you need a live business plan, right? A business plan that gets updated at least twice a day. Well, that business plan is based on a roadmap of where you're going, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? I mean, that's the famous quote. And so I just want to thank you for really emphasizing the importance of a roadmap, the importance of layering in the appetite and level of risk that someone's comfortable about. It is all about risk mitigation. And, there's great things that are going to happen in this next decade. And you can either choose to work 12 months in 12 months, or you can choose to have a roadmap and work 3 years in 12 months. The tighter you are, the more specific and measurable you are, the more effective you're going to be. Think community. If Jay and his team at thrivethrv.com can help you build that with technology and education, check them out. I think it is really, really important. As I said earlier, I'm a business coach. I work with successful people who are stuck and get them unstuck. And so I love the tools that you're providing to get people unstuck. And the first one, which is a trial-free 30-day course that you can take right off of thrv.com, thrive.com. And if you want more free stuff, you can download my book and my ebook at my website for free at johndwoskin.com. Well, Jay, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This was great. Think community, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, John.